What's up everybody, my name is Ben and today we got the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 15 Pro. Now the iPhone 14 is $729 from Apple while the 15 Pro is $1,000 from Apple. So let's just see, is the 15 Pro really worth all of that money? Let's dive right into it. So here are the two phones. Now there's really not a whole lot that's different right off the bat, but there are subtle little things here that make a big difference in these two phones' designs. Now on the left here, of course, we have the iPhone 15 Pro, which is made out of titanium and has some rounded edges that make it a lot more comfortable to hold than the iPhone 14. And of course, in the iPhone 14, it's made out of aluminum and has a more squared off design. Now also, of course, the back of the iPhone 14 is glossy while the 15 Pro is matte. And while the matte does look more premium, the 14 is far more grippy. I can hold it a lot easier without a case, without it sliding out of my hand. I can shake it around and there's some grip there with the 14. While with the 15, it's really slippery and I can't do that same thing with it. So that is something to consider with the 14 and those older iPhones that have the glossy backs, is that it is a bit more grippy if you're planning to use it caseless. Now, size-wise, these are both pretty big phones. They're not super comfortable to hold, but because the iPhone 15 Pro is a bit more rounded around those edges, holding it in the hand is a bit nicer. The 14 does feel kind of sharp in the hands, but at the end of the day, they're roughly the same size. If we put them really like on top of each other and side by side, you can see that the 15 Pro is a slightly smaller phone. And that is a perk with this phone, is that with all iPhones steadily getting bigger and bigger, this is the first iPhone we've seen in a while that is actually slightly smaller than the phones that came before it. Now, it's nothing like one of the mini iPhones, like my iPhone 13 mini, but it is just slightly enough smaller that you will notice it, especially when you're using it caseless. So now looking at the front of these phones, we can see there's already a very big difference just immediately apparent, and that is the always-on display that's on the iPhone 15 Pro. And the always-on display is really convenient. I personally have it turned off so it's just a black background, and so it doesn't show me my notifications, so it's less distracting. But I think by far the most useful part of this always-on display is when I'm driving. When I'm driving, the screen always stays on and it shows me directions as I keep going forward. But then as we turn on the displays, we can see they're remarkably similar. There's really not a lot of color saturation difference or reproduction difference between these two screens. Where you do notice a difference though is in ProMotion. So if we open up two of the same website here, and let's just zoom in a little bit, and let's just scroll down these websites. And it's gonna be really hard for the camera to pick up exactly, what's going on here. But if you just look at the way that it moves along with your finger, it is just so much more smooth and satisfying with the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPhone 14. And you can especially see that when you're navigating around the OS and doing gestures in comparison to the 14. Now they're both super smooth. They both have capable processors, with the iPhone 14 having the A15, while the iPhone 15 Pro has the A17 Pro chip. They're both capable, and we'll do a little bit of a speed test now to see just how those compare. So we've closed all the applications, and again, of course, we have the iPhone 15 Pro on the left here and the iPhone 14 on the right. We've closed everything. Let's go ahead and see just how fast it is with opening apps. We'll start off with the Reminders app. We can see both of those are quick, almost instant. Let's try the calendar, almost instant, but you can tell the 15 Pro is a little bit faster. Let's do the clock, again, almost instant. Let's go ahead and try Libby. Now those are almost the same. Now let's go ahead and open Apple News on both of these. And those took about the same amount of time. So you can see here that with just basic day-to-day applications, there is a slight edge for the iPhone 15 Pro, but performance is relatively similar between the two phones. I definitely wouldn't choose the iPhone 15 Pro just because of performance, unless you are a hardcore gamer or you're doing more with this phone than just basic day-to-day things. Now, one thing that is truly different between the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPhone 14 is the cameras. On the iPhone 14, you have just a 12 megapixel camera and then an ultra-wide camera, while on the iPhone 15 Pro, you have a 48 megapixel main sensor and then a telephoto camera and an ultra-wide sensor. On the front, though, both of the cameras are 12 megapixel selfie cameras. Now let's go ahead and do just a comparison of some pictures that we have for both of these cameras. Now you can see on the left here that the iPhone 15 Pro has a brighter image and the colors are a little bit more vibrant. Now let's go here to the outdoors, and you can see this is a pretty similar picture, but once again, the iPhone 15 Pro seems to have brighter colors to it and just more pleasurable to the eye. This picture is a little bit harder to tell, and dare I say, just right off the bat, the iPhone 14 does look a little bit nicer overall. I like the colors of the sky and the gradient of the sky a little bit nicer. This is a sample picture from the selfie camera, and you can see that the iPhone 15 Pro has a little bit more brightness to my face, even though I think that both the pictures look pretty decent. Here's another outdoor picture. Once again, I think the iPhone 14 actually captures the sky a little bit nicer, but if we zoom in on the details, I think the iPhone 15 Pro has more, just better detail when we actually zoom into it, given that 48 megapixel sensor. Now moving over here to another selfie picture. Again, I think these are similar enough that there really isn't much to be said, even though in this case I actually do prefer the look of the iPhone 14's color reproduction. Now this is a video test. Just a quick side-by-side microphone and camera test as I'm walking with the selfie camera, so you can get a good sense of the difference here, how they process the light. There we go. And then here is another video test and microphone test as we walk with it. See what kind of video stabilization we have as we walk, holding both these phones in our hand. And this is 720p 30 FPS video. And it's hard to say looking at either one of those videos that there really is much of a difference between these two cameras. I think video reproduction is relatively similar between the two of them. Here's another picture that, again, I feel like the iPhone 14 captures more contrast in the sky, which I like. But as we zoom in on the details of the picture, again, well, here in this case, I think they're relatively similar, which is interesting given the 14 Pro has, or 15 Pro has so many more megapixels. And here's another picture. I think in this picture especially, the iPhone 15 Pro shines in that it is able to handle the contrast of the sun and then handle the dynamic range with the rest of the shot. And then here we have more of a low light scene. I think the iPhone 15 Pro is able to capture more light and produce a better picture in both of these cases. Now, just a little note as I'm editing this video I wanted to make is that the iPhone 14 is incredibly similar to the iPhone 13. So if you're looking at the used market, just give another look at the iPhone 13, because the only difference between this phone and that phone is the camera sensor is a little bit newer in the iPhone 14, and the internal design of the iPhone 14 is changed so that it's cheaper to repair. So if you ever break the back glass, the price difference, as you can see here, is pretty different. So just a thought there on the iPhone 13 and the 14. So after having compared these phones, what phone should you buy? And I think that's a really hard question to answer because the pricing on these phones is really unique to every situation. if you're switching to a new carrier, or if you have an upgrade that gives you the iPhone 15 Pro for free, then the iPhone 15 Pro is the clear, far and away, the better choice. You have a better camera, you have a much nicer ProMotion display, and the display in the sunlight also gets a lot brighter than the iPhone 14. But that being said, in my specific case, when I was given the chance to upgrade with my carrier, the iPhone 14 was a free upgrade, while the iPhone 15 Pro was a $550 upgrade. And given just that difference in price, the iPhone 14 is an absolute no-brainer. There's so little that you're missing out on with this iPhone 14. You only are sacrificing the telephoto camera lens, ProMotion display, a little bit weaker brightness on the display, and a weaker chip in the A15 instead of the A17 Pro. But all things considered, do I really think that is worth a $550 difference in price? Definitely not. So it just kind of comes down to what is your situation in terms of the pricing between these two devices. And I think personally that the iPhone 14 is still, it's a really good phone. There's really not much that you're missing out on with it. Now, I think a lot of these tech channels, tech videos in general, will look at the pricing that's on the Apple website. Oh, the iPhone 15 Pro is $1,000. The iPhone 14 is $730. Is the $270 difference worth it? But I think we have to go deeper than that into your own personal situation and how much will each of these phones actually cost you to get. And as I look on the used market, I see that these iPhone 15 Pros are starting to come down to like $700, $800, while you can get an iPhone 14 for about $400, $450. So if you're looking at that used market, then that really is another huge difference that I think leans towards the iPhone 14. If you're really looking at dollar for dollar, what do you need in your iPhone? And I think the iPhone 14 really is something to consider unless you are genuinely convinced by what the iPhone 15 Pro has to offer over the 14. So thank you all for checking out this video. Please let me know down below your thoughts on this comparison and what phone you choose. Thanks again.